Hi, everybody. This is David P. France, and I'm coming to you from Basel, Switzerland. Before we start our interview today, for those who are out there, please like the videos that you're watching, share the videos with your friends and family, and subscribe to the YouTube and BitChute channel. This is David P. France TV. We are a platform for creators and creative people. That includes artists, inventors, thought leaders, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. And today I'm speaking with a longtime friend, once again, Lea Kraemer. Lea is based in Los Angeles, California, and she is a yoga therapist and teacher. And Lea and I go back, many, many years. So, excuse us if we start to speak in short form. We'll do our best to make sure that the conversation is broad enough so that people are able to jump on board and follow us, right? So Lea, tell me what you're up to, because I haven't, I think the last time we spoke, it was a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about fear and healing and all kinds of things. But you told me before we started the call that you were, wasn't that you was inspired, it's just that you had so many things that you were processing, things that were on your mind. So help us or lead us into this first area, or some, the first thing that you have to share with us today.
I've been working mostly online with people who want to heal naturally, and that's been an incredible transition during this whole past year plus, and during the pandemic. It sharpens my skills in many ways. It continues to be a challenge not to be with people and just be able to literally touch them and share energy and share space and even share breath the way that we used to. But being able to work with people from all over the world who've chosen to work on their mental, spiritual, physical health naturally, and to try to find that place within themselves that they can heal themselves, that is an honor. Like, that continues to be an honor for me, and a passion. The body and the mind and the spirit can heal, but we have tools through yoga, through breath, through meditation, through food, through herbs, and through nature that catapult not only our personal development, but our healing process. So I'm so interested in that. In modern day, I really feel that what is being called is biohacking. But this is what the yogis and yoginis were doing from centuries ago. And the shamans, we were biohacking. We were biohacking into our essential systems and really wondering what they were about. And sometimes people going through any kind of recovery from illness, recovery from addiction, recovery from trauma, all of a sudden, when the constraints are off, they simultaneously become interested in like the heights of their healing, the possibility of their self-awareness, their self-governance. So that's been both intense and a joy and an honor. I'm also finishing right now an Agni yoga as therapy training. And we have a small group from all over the world. So I've been giving a teacher training in yoga therapy since 2001. This one is all online. And yeah, we have people from like Israel and Spain and New Jersey and Massachusetts and LA. So the global nature of what's going on right now is pretty amazing. I'm continuing to work with an organization called Yoga Unify that I think I spoke a little bit about last time. Yoga Unify is the first organization in this country that is going to have a peer-based review system, so that people can't just sign up. They can't just pay some money, which was going on previously, and say they're a qualified yoga teacher. They actually have to be qualified, and they're brought in by their peers. There are portfolios that are going to be outward facing or public facing, to really know what people's education is, what people's background is, and what various teachers offer. So this is a real reshaping of how we educate yoga teachers in this country, or how we can really find the teachers or the communities or the students that are like-minded, rather than just a flat place that you register and there's no information. So I won't go more into that history, but it's been a big thing in the yoga community. And it's definitely a fix, but it's also a re-envisioning that takes us back to the very beginning, when we had mentors and dialogue with our teachers and communication about, the level of what we now call the scope of our practice. So that's another thing that I'm doing. I'm also, I just self-published a book, by the way. So when we put the links, I'll put that out there. It's a workbook. Yeah, it's a kind of workbook on yoga. Has a really large variety of practices in it, from meditations to really physical practices. But it's a workbook of yoga practices that I've been teaching for, maybe like 25 years. So it's kind of like the best synthesis of practices that I've been giving. There's moon salutations in there, blessings to Mother Moon, as well as a lot of breath work and meditation practices that are not found elsewhere. And then sort of choreographies of the soul, like vinyasas, or really flowing sets that come from my own experience and vision as a dancer. So that's some of what I've been doing. There's been, there's been a lot going on, and I just feel for myself, I just feel a nice relationship right now between my own learning, my own seeking of wisdom and light, and what I'm trying to offer people every day. There's a nice exchange between those two. I'm working really hard, but within that, I'm very, the only word I can use again is like honored. I just feel very blessed to be doing this work.
Well, let me ask you a question about the healing part, the first part. How do people find you, the people that are not necessarily in tune with, sort of this whole yoga structure, which you are, putting in place and that you are helping to create? How do people, particularly people who are on the outside of this community, how do they find you? Is it through a multitude of avenues or ways, or do they somehow sort of say, I think I need to go to yoga? Or what is your experience with people that find you?
That is such a good question. Because I don't actually even have a website that says I am a yoga therapist. I don't even have that. It's included in other things. But a lot of it is people's mothers, people's sisters, people's friends. A recent student that I have who's working on some healing, I met her through a friend's voice teacher who had heard of me, who felt that her other voice student should somehow work with me. So it's these webs, these interwoven webs of reality. It's very, very interesting. But through friends and through relatives is the short answer. And the answer is really what you just alluded to. Like, there are these interconnected sort of pathways that then all of a sudden I connect with people who are really looking for what we call yoga, right? The mind's connection to the body and the spirit. Yeah.
And so let's say when they come to you, do they say, okay, I need to be healed? Or, I mean, what is the general conversation that happens with someone who's like, oh, I just, I think I need to.
Well, that is such an interesting question. A lot of times, because I get a lot of referrals, I'll get a note, like an email or a message from somebody telling a bit of somebody else's story.
Okay.
which I never said it out loud in that way before, but that is that's already community, right? Like a friend or relative or a teacher will tell me about another person's story. There's this person that I know that, again, is an artist or an opera singer that's going through this, that wants to work on this. And so it's not just a little bit of a case study that I'm getting right away. It's somebody's story from somebody else's handoff. And so that happens a lot. And it leaves, again, room for me to contact that person and say, like, what would you like to do? What would you like to work on? This is what I've heard of you. So when I first meet with people, it's not just like an intake. I really speak to people about what they would like to do. What's their goal? You know, because healing can look many different ways. It doesn't have to look the way that it would look just from a common Western medical point of view. So I really want to be so I really want to be careful and respectful of other people's intentions, of other people's goals. Right? And some people say right away, like, for a lot of people, they want to get out of pain. You know, a high percentage of that, people are in pain. They're doing all the quote unquote right things. They're following protocols. They're taking various pharmaceuticals, and they're still in pain. And it can be mental pain as well as physical pain. Yeah. So yoga is very good for that, thank God. And then, so pain would be like really high on the list of things that people want to work on. And then a lot of people come to me to either lower the amount of pharmaceutical drugs they're taking or get off them, right? And so I'm really happy to work with people's doctors or other medical teams so that if they're lowering the drugs that they're on that have all sorts of massive side effects, we can do it really gracefully and easily together, right? That's a big concern right now. And then there are people that, you know, have been longtime practitioners, longtime yogis, again, or dancers or artists that want to work on any issue. Could be stress, IBS, could be lupus, could be bipolar, you know, so many different kinds of diagnoses, but they realize that what they want to work on is healing themselves. So that's the other slice, that people, after, in some cases, years, don't care what their diagnosis is. They want to work on that themselves as a being and not on the diagnosis. And then, like, I love that. I love doing that kind of work.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that, you know, I have myself to use as an example, because there was a time where I had all of this kind of digestive stuff, and I mean, it's, you name it. But I think part of it, well, I think all of it had to do with what was going on inside of me, right? And in terms of my soul and my identity to the world versus my soul, or who I really was, or who, you know, people, in other words, people really didn't know who I really was, partly because I wasn't sharing that.
Yeah.
And I know that I was supposed to be in a role where I had to share it, right? So as a dancer, right, if I'm born a dancer and I'm not dancing as the primary thing, then there's a problem, right? And the problem exists or comes through in a different variety of, or a number of ways. And so I extrapolate from my own experience, and I think it has to be similar to other people that are designed differently, right? And that just might be one variant or variety of or way that some sort of chaos can form in your body or in your mind, in your system. So there's other ways, like, you know, somebody could perpetrate something on you, like, or harm you, but it could be that you're not doing what God gifted you to do. And therefore there is this, how do you say, disruption internally, which over a long period of time can put you in a place where you feel mental pain and physical pain. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you?
It perfectly makes sense. It perfectly makes sense. And what came up for me as you were saying that is many people have identified with a condition or their diagnosis or their illness. They've been taught to identify with that through fear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a double illness, or it's like a double wound.
Yeah.
That not only are they dealing with this gut issue or a diagnosis of being bipolar, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
but they have been taught to fear that to such an extreme that they don't trust themselves, that they don't celebrate themselves, literally, that they don't see themselves as a source of light. And that's actually one of the meditations I do with people, especially people that are going through greater mental stress or people that have diagnoses that seem more severe.
Mm-hmm.
I've recently had a discussion also with somebody about this, that they were being told as a teacher that they couldn't teach meditation to people who had a diagnosis of psychosis because those people were unable to hold their mind, that those people were unable to sort of stabilize their psyche. Thank you. And I made the face that you just made because I said that is it's like watering a thirsty plant. That is
Right.
exactly why I've found out I know how to do it. I have both a lot of training and a lot of experience to share, but I find that people who have, again, these diagnoses of like bipolar or psychosis, when they experience meditation, it's the first time that they feel that they've been with themselves,
Right.
that they are actually shining through, that there's not, there's no fear there in that space. There's no fear. There's no fear of self. There's no fear of experiencing yourself. There's no fear of experiencing essentially like your light or your purpose. So for me, again, I do it very safely and I do it very individually, but bringing people into their experience of themselves that is radiant, that is bold, even that's not attached to fear, then allows people to have the movement that you just talked about. One woman that I worked with this week told me that after our session, and we were meditating on her light. We were just meditating on her light, and she had this fabulous session. And then she told me the next week, she's like, I was knitting, which for her, she loved. Like she went back to knitting. She went back to reaching out to people that she hadn't reached out to for a long time. And that can sound very small from the outside, but we know it's not. You know what I mean?
No, it's huge.
The expression of her, I don't think she'd done that in years. Yeah.
It's huge.
So,
it's huge.
Yeah.
It's funny because I feel like, I mean, part of the reason why I have the channel is to bring people like yourself on. But as I'm talking to you now, like you can see I'm grinning, or because that means that I'm understanding. But it's like you and I do the same thing, but in different ways. And in saying that, that's even broad, right? I do it for groups of people or communities, right? So I'll give you an example just so we talked before we started the interview. I was telling you about work, and part of my job has evolved into the social media coordinator at work. So gradually, a lot of the tasks that I do normally here personally, it's now merging into the professional, right? And it's only because when they hired me, they initially went to my social media page. Now that would not have happened, when you and I were coming up. I think even at a certain point, when you hire someone, there's no assumption that you have a right to say, hey, I want to join your social media page. I mean, that's supposedly a private place, right? Well, not anymore, but it used to be they would look at it. Right now they're like, hey, can I join? And that was only like within the very first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
The good thing about that is that they immediately started to move into, as you say, the space in which I hold for other people. Right. So I'm like, well, you're the ones that asked to join, so now you can't get out. Right. So they are now seeing the way that I dialogue with people. And part of what I'm doing, I believe I'm doing on social media, and it sounds weird for me to say this, and I want your opinion of it, is that I'm trying to do healings individually and group-wise through what I'm putting out into the social media platform, so that it's almost like I don't want to, a lifeline is too strong of a word. I'm not throwing out lifelines.
No, it's not. No,
I am extending myself and extending the platform so that people feel that they have a place, to then jump off of for themselves.
Right.
And I think this is what I think originally the social media was for. So I saw a quote earlier today on LinkedIn by this big marketing guru named Gary Vee, who grew up in, I think, Short Hills, New Jersey, or Millburn, New Jersey, West Orange, one of those places.
Like he's 10 minutes from us.
Yeah, minutes. He grew up, he was a Russian immigrant. He is now one of the top, or if not the top, internet or social media gurus in the space. And he says,
I didn't even know that.
Oh yeah, he's one of the top ones.
Yeah.
He's one of the top ones. He is amazing. And he said, in this world of the Jetsons, and then he holds up his cell phone, he goes, it's the people who act like the Flintstones that will end up winning. And what he says by that, or what he means by that, is that building relationships and building connection is really important, and having dialogue is important, right? So it's not about all of these buttons and gadgets and all of these other things. You want to take the dialogue with the technology. You want to use the technology to extend, conversation, right? You want
to hold it. You want to ground it. Like I get that image of like Fred Flintstone and his car of rocks.
Exactly.
Right. You want to ground it. You want to hold it. Right. We're having really new methods for creating spiritual texts. The old method, I have all of like my favorite books behind me, but what we are creating will become the next spiritual texts, which will be multimedia, right? And we'll have video, maybe even in the future, well, not so far future, like 3D video is here, So what we create with the next spiritual text and the next art and the next conversations is becoming blended in a really exciting way. I also want to respond to what you said a moment ago, and I think that when you extend yourself, which you are, it's a little bit different than just saying I extend the lifeline. So you just stay the channel.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Yeah, you're just the channel. You're saying I extend myself because it's you, but it is that lifeline. You just extend the channel. That's all. And then it's not.
I don't visualize when I say that, like, throwing a rope to somebody and pulling them in. That's what it is. It's not that I feel that that's what I'm doing. It's just that's what's taking place. And another thing is that people are actually witnessing. You become a witness to someone else's progress on social media, right? So what it's doing is it's flipping. It's flipping what normally would have taken place at a work environment. So here they evaluate you at work for what you are or are not doing. But then the reason why they're able to see, how can I put it this way? They hired me, then they asked to join the social media. But now from this point on, what's happening at work and what's happening outside of work is the same.
Right. Wow.
So they can't say
so during to a whole other level of what you just said, that like you are here on this earth to move as yourself, to move, to
Yeah.
dance, to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
Because
about
that's what I was
them.
getting, like, in extending the lifeline, that's not a stagnant image. That's a very moving, energetic relationship. That's what I got from it, right? Extending
Yeah.
the lifeline, not as, like you said, like throwing a rope, but creating a movement,
Yeah,
right? Creating
exactly.
a movement that's a channel. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I just
this
want to
is,
say before our
yes.
discussion, I always pick a card. I just pick
Uh-huh.
a random card, and I have several decks of cards that I still use. And the one that I picked is the world is our heaven.
On earth.
Yeah. Yeah. The world is our heaven on earth.
And what does that mean to you in terms of you know, what we've discussed so far, and then also before we had the conversation, and then just in general, the card itself, the card, what does that
Oh my God, I'm
say to
such
you,
a yogini. I'm such a yogini.
Uh-huh.
Patanjali's Yoga Sutras begins now. It begins with placing ourselves now in this time, right? So for they're mystics, but they're really like earthers. Now is the time. It's not some other time. We will hope that maybe if we say, do, or beg for the right thing, we'll get to another state. It's now, right? Like we create it. That's what it resonates for as me. You know, now is the time. Heaven on earth is now, right? It's actually here. It's actually real, but it's not for another person to create. It's not to think, again, it's not to think that through some other method outside of myself or by finding somebody else somewhere else at some other time. It's now, right? And I do feel like that's what artists do. That's the transportation to me, again, to bring it back, like that's dance.
Yeah, it is.
And literally, again, we said we were going to stay out of a conversation that is like too much ours. But again, I remember the feeling when we were dancing and we were young, and it was heaven on earth, right? Like watching you dance was like, that is heaven on earth.
Well, you know what? You have something, you brought up an interesting point. I tell people that the best time that I had with regard to dance was really in high school for me. College,
Totally.
you know, it was good. I mean, those people that were in the dance program with me in college, high school was just more, we were, you know, do you understand what I'm saying? We were out there. We were really sort of like, you know, like, let's try to do A, B, and C. And then we try to do A, B, and C. And I think from this point on, what I've tried to create is some semblance of that. You know,
right.
It's very difficult. The closest I got to it was when I went to a retreat that was organized by these two Russian brothers, the Ostrenko brothers in Austria. So they had more of an energy of kind of what you've just talked about. But the thing that wasn't so good is that the people that were in the program, they didn't really understand it like I understood it, right? So there was a little bit of competition there, and people didn't like me because, you know, I think, again, I was vibing on some other level. And at that point, just as a side note, I had just started my journey through this sort of sickness that I had, that I told you about. What I think that was is that, Lea, I think it was, if you want to bring God into it, it was God's way of saying, no, you're not supposed to be there. You are supposed to be here. And now you're going to go there. Does that make sense? And I was like, you know, so I was fighting and whatever. And I took that class as a way to try to, as you say, hack to make the jump from there through a different door, right? So I needed to get there quickly. I needed to get to where God told me I needed to be. And I said, if I can get a shortcut, let me see if I can hack the system. And for like, I guess 3 or 4 years. But I bring it back to when you say we were in this space of now, in hindsight, as I think back to high school,
We
I
really
think,
were. Yeah. Yeah. It's like your first love. Right?
exactly.
Now, I had been dancing a long time, and as
Uh-huh.
we always take a moment and talk about high school dance, and we have these conversations. So there were several, females within that company that have been like training since we were little kids. But for some reason, there was this, well, for some reason, and because of our teacher, Janet Hicks, there was this spark of like first love. It was like this first love energy that happened there.
Mm.
And that's the easiest thing I can equate it to that feels truthful for me, right?
Yeah.
There was that experience going on. So it's that kind of thing, like, then you spend your whole life, how can I get back to that feeling? And it's also, right, it's also called like beginner's mind, right? When it's not that there weren't things going on. There's always earth stuff going on. But in the middle of it, it was like beginner's mind. We weren't exactly in our egos. Like you said, we were just trying stuff and shining and watching each other shine.
Yeah. And
really
look,
watching each other shine.
That, and you hit the nail on the head, because part of what the success is that the other people in the group, whatever the group you decide to be in, they have to see how other people are successful. Right. So that the whole idea of having a hierarchy in a corporation where you are, okay, you have a boss and this and on top of this and this, it doesn't work.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't work. And, when I was evaluated.
Right, it doesn't work unless you let people do not what they need to do, but what is going to create more energy for themselves and everyone, like that. Right. Whether it's in a company, a dance company, an arts company, or a corporation, having, like this title, that title, that's only stagnant energy.
That's right.
Unless you elevate the actual beings within that organization or corporation or company to do their thing, basically. Yeah. I felt so supported, like as a young modern dancer, I felt so supported by our teacher and the company. I really did. It was very interesting.
Yeah. And because of that, the company still exists, right? And there are people that are still, that are going through. But I again, and not to brag or to, boast or anything, I was one of the founding members of the dance company that was formed at the University of Pennsylvania. And the same thing is happening. That company still exists.
Wow.
Right. Now, the person who did was one of the founding members, or the actual founder. Mm-hmm. She did not understand, like I understood because of special dance, how important that was, that it was still existing, right? So you're putting energy, or you're moving something into space. And I think because they thought, oh, it's only college, so it doesn't count, that, in the way that we are operating in the world. Okay, college, once you leave, it's over for a lot of people, right? And that's fine. But when you think about, something that you started is still operating 30 years later, and you're not there, huge deal, right? It means that you tapped into something that was an act, you pulled something out of the, the ethers that was needed at the time.
Again, it was a spark. Yeah. It was a spark. And I'll even say, those are divine sparks. Mm-hmm. Right. Some people use the language like soul contract, like you're talking about. There's a soul contract, and unless you're operating within your soul's contract, like nothing's even going to work. It's not going to, on the physical level, it's not even going to happen unless you're operating within that. Yeah. And so there's that divine spark, and it people don't realize that they have set an intention then, maybe for their whole lives.
Yeah. How can someone who is so, what's the best way to say this? How can someone who is totally unaware of what we're talking about get in on the discussion? Like, what would be the bridge, do you feel, for someone who has no idea what we're talking about? Like, what?
Close your eyes and start breathing. Close your eyes, start feeling in your body. As you breathe in, there is so much movement. As you breathe, just to breathe in, just the action of breathing in. Mm-hmm. it is an incredible movement away from stagnancy. Then as you breathe out, most people haven't spent the time to breathe out. They haven't spent the time, they haven't had the experience, and then they haven't paid attention to that experience. And once you start to do that, or if you do it all the time, if you do it now, it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like breathing in takes a long time.
Yeah, sure.
Breathing in, it takes incredible strength, but it must happen so easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't use your strength in a chaotic, forceful, or aggressive self way. When you breathe in, you won't have the same experience. So it's that yin and yang that is so powerful, so strong, and must be so easeful just to breathe in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you, as you breathe out, the inverse is happening. Breathing out is letting go.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing can happen without letting go of the last breath, of the last moment, of yourself. So that's what I would say. And I know I totally sound like a yoga teacher, but it is true. Close your eyes and breathe and hear your breath and feel in your body. And then everything will shift. You might start to dance. You might go outside and walk. You might knit something. But from that impetus, right, from that breath, you begin.
And I also want to bring up the idea of nutrition and food, and we touched on this a bit before during the last conversation. What I have been doing since I work from home now, I cook everything on my own.
Half the world works from home.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working at home, but I'm cooking. I mean, I haven't cooked for myself, like really with a focus. So today, for example, and I just saw a picture of this and I said, oh, I can do that, right? I saw somebody put a pot in on TikTok, carrots, cabbage, red onion. I think that's all they put in. And then I put in potatoes, chicken stock, pepper, white pepper, garlic. And I just put it on the boom. And I could sense as I was cooking, I said, Dave, this is good stuff. Like I generally don't do this for myself. Yeah. And part of what's happening, again, I bring it back to work. They put me on this as the social media, not called social media, it's something called Connect. So I said, David, you're going to be managing that. So they say, okay, now that everybody's working at home, we got to figure out a way to stay connected. That's the whole idea of it.
Yeah. And
so at first we used a music challenge where they say, put the video of your favorite song, right? And so we did that for a month, and now it's put your favorite recipe. So I'm thinking, isn't this interesting? We really are going back to basics. Like we really we've been forced to go back to the basics. So I just want to take some time on the nutrition part and the food part, because you start, throwing out these spices and this is what we were talking about toward the end of last. What is your take on nutrition, the kinds of foods we should be eating during this sort of weird time? What are you doing for yourself? Is there something that you can tell the audience that might be inspirational for them, in the same way as I look at a picture and say, I can throw some cabbage in a pot. I can throw some carrots in some water. Because essentially that's how it happened for me.
Great discussion. I'll start with myself then. Yesterday, something happened with me and Brussels sprouts. I'll just start with myself. I mean, nothing fancy happened with the Brussels sprouts, but it was an amazing Brussels sprout event. And, and I just washed the Brussels sprouts, baked them for a little bit, and then sauteed them with some spices and a little bit of vinegar and spices and garlic and a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, but also a bit of turmeric, which is amazing as many people know, it really is amazing stuff for anti-inflammation. And it was also like the love. It was just the love and the connection with the Brussels sprouts I was having at that moment. They were incredible. And I just ate a cup of Brussels sprouts. So it is that love and self-care that you're speaking about. I think that that is the most nutritious thing. I really do.
Mhm.
That if you're eating just to satisfy a craving or just to satisfy a desire, it's very different than if you're eating to nurture yourself.
Mhm.
If you're eating to create a stronger, healthier you, which is essentially to nurture yourself. Now, both sound from the outside like fun, or both sound like from the outside like tasty, but it's a very different interaction, right? Eating because you're craving something or desiring something is a feeling of you don't have enough. It's a not enoughism
Right,
that
right,
our
right,
culture
right,
suffers from,
right.
versus eating from like, this is amazing. I
Uh-huh.
am, every like cell of my body was singing with those Brussels sprouts. That sounds funny, but that's how it
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
to
yeah.
me.
Look, I
Is something
understand
that's
you. I
amazing.
understand you.
Yeah,
I understand
right.
100%. 100%. Because you hit the nail on the head, which is the same way that I'm doing the posting on my own social media, and even with, this is what I'm doing at work. So it started to work, Lea. I mean, people started to post, the increases started to happen, right? So of course they're looking at it like, I mean, they know that I can do it, but it's another thing to see the numbers start to go up. And I
Yeah,
think part of
wow.
it is that you hit the nail on the head, which is we're finding recipes, or we're finding songs, just like a DJ does, right? And puts it in a list. And you're
I just have
literally,
to say, I love the idea of a recipe as a song. You gave me that. I'm gonna use that. Like, a recipe is a song. Go
it
ahead.
is.
Sorry.
It is.
Yeah,
It is. It's a variation
brilliant.
on the same thing, because it's all communication, right? So it's one thing if I say, hey, I really like this piece of pie. I'm really hungry, so therefore here's the pie. It's another thing if I say, this is the pie that came from, I don't know, the Greeks used to make this pie, and when they made the pie, they used to put in these some special ingredients, and on really, special days, I make it for myself, and I kind of use this. And if you are interested in finding out more, here's the link to more recipes, or you can, feel free to reach out to me.
Right. It's
different.
that transition or that remembrance of being replenished,
Yeah.
of being revitalized, rather than not having enough. And that was how I was trying to explain the difference between like a craving and a nurturing.
Yeah, you did
right.
it.
And
Yeah,
I think that it's difficult, by the way. I have a lot of students, a lot of clients who think they have to like count calories. Now, you can count calories, that's fine. But I always point out that, even if somebody tests a calorie and then I eat that thing and you eat that thing, how my body assimilates it may be different. So we may not be getting the same calories.
Yeah, look,
Right?
it's
Yeah. But a calorie is that's the external test.
Yes.
If you can't digest that food, right, then
I hear you.
The caloric intake looks very different in one constitution than the other, because you have to take that food and assimilate it. You have to cook that food within your own body. So I also want to say that the baseline is that we have to eat clean, fresh, and high quality.
Mhm.
You cannot be spiritually healthy. You can't be healthy in your body tissues if you're eating low quality food. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for anybody. There are 1,000 reasons why we could talk about why it doesn't work. But the main reason is, if you want to be clear, if you want to have vitality in this moment, and if you want to have a high quality or a high level consciousness, you can't eat low. It doesn't work. Can you do it one day? Yeah, maybe. What did I eat? Last week I ate something chocolate that was awful, but I loved it at that moment. So I'm not talking about being rigid, but if you want to have, like that, those three qualities: clean, fresh, and high quality, right? If you want to be clear in your psyche, If you want to be present in your psyche, like have synaptic quickness, right? Your neurology, your neurological system, you want to be strong and healthy, and you want to have a high frequency, or living in bliss, we could call it, but just being conscious. Then your food needs to be that. We eat how we believe. That's what happens. So an amazing way to change your belief system, and that sharing recipe thing is so beautiful along with that. Yeah, we eat how we believe. So if you want to change your belief system, eat differently. I am a vegetarian. I'm often a vegan, but not always. But I definitely don't believe in eating. I don't believe in murdering something so that I can have a meal. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I'll say that. Not all my clients are, but they know that I am. What happens if you go more to a vegetarian diet is your tissues and your gut really have a chance to recuperate. So it is, I find that it is very helpful for healing. And then on another level, it's very helpful for really being with yourself energetically. If you're not digesting meat, if you're not digesting foods that take a really long time to go through your intestinal tract, and you're not trying to digest foods that that don't have the most prana. The ancient understanding is that if you eat something that is closest to the energy of the sun, like the sun shines on the cilantro leaves, and the sun shines on the basil, and then that gets picked by my California farming community, and I buy it at the farmer's market, right? That is really like, it's soaked in the prana, it's soaked in the life energy, it's soaked in the sun energy, and it's right there, and I can have that. Versus if I buy something that has had to consume several other things in order to get that energy. That's the old image, right? That's ancient image that yogis were vibing on. And again, I'll call them like the original biohackers. They're like, how close can I get to that source energy, that life energy? So that's, you know, part of the fascination with what happens when you eat those plant foods, or those natural foods that are the richest in prana. In our culture, what we have is this frozen or fast food industry. I couldn't say that. I knew I wasn't going to be able to say that. Where, you know, the sun shines on something, let's still call it a vegetable. It gets picked, it gets processed, it gets put on conveyor belts, it gets frozen, it gets shipped, it gets moved around, and then it comes onto a shelf somewhere, and it's still vegetarian, so to speak, or still really healthy, but it's in some frozen cabinet for months before I open it up. Therefore, its life energy, unfortunately, respectfully, has been drained. If the life energy hasn't been drained, it is stagnant. If you constantly eat that stagnant or life-drained energy food, that is what you're feeding yourself, and you will still crave more and more and more, and you'll never feel like, I've got enough, you know? And what starts to change the prana is either when you can go to that fresh, beautiful life energy source, and as you said, when you start to like cook for yourself and feel that the energy that you're creating in the food is an echo of how you feel in your universe, or how you want to feel in your own mind.
Yeah, and look, this is why art and expression and all of the different spokes out of that communication, you know, what we were talking about before, is important. Because let's say when I make a post, let's say on a social media platform, sometimes I'm not necessarily living that post, right? That's an aspirational post, right? That's where my mind, you know, wants to be at the moment, right? Sometimes, you know, what people will do is they'll put like Throwback Thursday or something like that to make sure that people know that it's not happening in the present. But I like to put out images because it, in my opinion, communicates to people where you are at the moment, right? Like, what kind of thoughts do you have about things that are beautiful, right? So I think part of what I've been trying to curate for many, many years now is sort of this visual, right? And you recently saw me dancing, making these dance videos, but that was on a different platform, which they give you all these different little edit things that you can do on a phone. And I said, okay, let's try that. Let's try to get back to the dancing and movement using that technology, right? But I think this is why I believe that art, particularly when this pandemic ends, there's going to be an explosion of creativity, much like
So
what we
much,
experience in
I
going
want
up in the
to
journey.
dance with you again at some point. I want to dance with you again.
Well, look, I'm trying to get
That's
myself
amazing.
healthy so I can do that kind of dancing,
Yeah.
right? That I think that was the whole, God speaking to me, like, is there another round? Can I go for another round? Like, and if there's another round, like, all right, so you have to start eating healthy.
What will we call our dance company by then? It would be like Old Radiant Dancers.
I think there's a way to do it, because dance, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be, how can I, you can design it any kind of way you want to design it. That's the thing that's so great about dance and dance expression, that we haven't even, we see things that are out there, but there's so many other avenues in which we can go down. And I think you said it correctly. When we were in high school, there was this opportunity of experimentation, right?
But let's bring that back to the food again. I think this is brilliant, right? That image of eating the consciousness that you aspire to. That is so beautiful. Like, that is so healing to me. That's so vital to me. Sometimes that's why, like, I remember going to India and eating a meal that I had never tasted before, spices I had never tasted before. When you travel, right? It's what you were describing before, that you took into being an artist and a dancer, that you're seeking an expansive energy. You're seeking an experience of consciousness or expansion or joy, and eating for ecstasy, or eating to experience something that you haven't yet reached. God, that is so beautiful. That is very, very nutritious. I think that's very, very healing. No, you can't, if you're only going to eat, I don't know, fried cheese that way. No, I don't think that would work. But that's not what happens when you travel the world. You know, travel the world and you're really tasting, loving, experiencing. You hit that, again, that clean, fresh and high frequency, or clean, fresh and high quality level, and I think bringing that into our life, the experience of daily food preparation or daily cooking with an essence of aspiring to certain qualities, certain flavors, certain textures, that would completely change. The next time I cooked my Brussels sprouts, it would be a totally different experience.
Well, when you were describing what you were putting on it, I was like, I'd never done that before. Like, I think you had like some garlic and some, what else did you put on there? You put garlic.
Okay, it may have been weird, but
No, it was good, because it made sense to me, but I was already like computing in my head. I'm like, okay, kind of what that would smell like.
Olive oil. It had olive oil. It had garlic. It had a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. It had some really good vinegar, actually.
Right, it was the vinegar that you told me.
Yeah, the vinegar brings it out.
What does the vinegar do? What does the vinegar do with the
I think
Brussels
it brings it out. Like, it brings out the flavor a lot. And then towards the end, I put some turmeric in it, which of course completely changes the color, but it was really beautiful and really tasty. And I didn't put too much turmeric in it, but I put it in when it was like hot, so it really like absorbed the turmeric.
And was it really red vinegar or white vinegar, or what type of vinegar?
It was red vinegar.
Red vinegar. Okay. So like even something like that, and maybe look, before the pandemic, there were people doing this, right? It wasn't me, but people were doing this. But I think, because we're in sort of this like mode, and I also think that we all were sort of going at this sort of pace where technology was sort of taking us over, and we did not have time to really take care of relationships. I think relationships, taking care of your relationships, it's really, really important. It really is important. And I think we're now being forced to, some of us. Some of us, but you know.
Going back again, or continuing that thought, I'll just say our relationship to food. Another, this is very Ayurvedic, it's very yogic, but I think, you know, in any culture around the world, one of the things that we're losing is our relationship to eating seasonally. That's also locally, right? So that relationship to eating food that's seasonal to where you are, and then to whatever extent possible, eating locally, that is also incredibly healing. So it's healing for your circadian rhythms. It's also healing for the community around you. You know, if you can support food that is grown locally, you know, then you're tying in your understanding of supporting the community around you, and literally like your gut structure within you. If you eat local,
I'm sorry, when you say locally, and what's the other, you eating regionally and locally, is that what you said?
Seasonally.
Seasonally. So what is specifically seasonally? Give me an example of that. So in the winter, I'm going to eat. An
example, really, right now, we're in spring, we're heading into summer, but of course, we just came from winter. So in winter is a time to have root vegetables, to replenish your, right? You're not yet in the spring thaw, so to speak. So winter Ayurvedically, and again, I'd venture to say in every culture around the world, we know that winter is a time that you're building your strength, right? You've not yet hit that spring thaw. So you're building up, you're sustaining yourself. Therefore, things like root vegetables are amazing during the winter. Those kind of winter soups, right? That have good root vegetables, good yams, things like that. Now we're into the spring and into the summer. So the food is getting lighter, just like things in our environment are getting lighter, right? Things are flowing. And not only are the foods getting lighter, but this idea again of fresh and local might lead us to things with cilantro, things with basil, things that really let our energy move and flow, and whatever has accumulated within us that is too much, we can let go of. That's why it's a beautiful time. This time of year is a beautiful time to do that work again, spiritually, energetically, and in our food. You're eating in the spring to detoxify yourself. You're eating in this, like spring going into the summer. It's about replenishing your mind and detoxifying the tissues of the body.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Look, you know what I'm thinking? And this is a crazy thought, but it's almost like I'm thinking, are they teaching this in schools? Like, why is this all sort of like adult education courses? I really think that there should be, like what you've just described. I mean, this is a serious curriculum. And this is how I feel when I'm hearing the information. Now, I don't know, who makes up curriculum for the, for school systems, but I think that this is what I believe. I bet you that what you and I are talking about right now is very few people in the school systems that are really on to this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. This is
very few doctors are taught this, right? Things are starting to change, but our doctors are barely taught nutrition historically, and they're certainly not taught seasonal nutrition.
No.
But seasonal nutrition, right? Like what every farmer knows, like, look what's growing and then eat that. Don't try to eat the thing that's not growing and wonder why your gut is stagnant, right? If we're always trying to eat the thing that is not actually even going to have life support around us or grow around us, how is our biological body going to react to that? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Another one is to eat how your ancestors ate. That's a really cool one. I know healers that work with that. That's a really cool one. That opens up a whole other box for me. So then, like for myself, I could get into like, Mediterranean, right? Like Mediterranean Israeli food and tabbouleh and all this stuff. Again, I don't eat meat, but it opens up that box for me of those kind of Mediterranean spices, or the spices that are like, you know, growing in areas where my Israeli relatives are living. I love that. I love that kind of food anyway, but I love that idea.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
and then we
I
can
just
share that with each other, but to, you know, to go back and examine what your ancestors ate and how it is good for your body. It kind of ties into what you're saying, like where does your soul want to go? You know, where is the God essence within you directing you?
I do
Rather than just trying to eat. Eating
Yeah.
calories is so miserable to me. I say respectfully, like eating for calories or eating to check off how much magnesium you had is so like pales in comparison to what we're talking about. But I'll say one more thing, because it is important to address nutrition.
Mhm.
And when you go back to eating like this, I eat a lot of Indian spices because I love Ayurveda and yoga. But the other thing that happens when you eat like this is you tend to eat all of the tastes. You know, there's colors in the food, there's flavors in the food. And when we cover all of the tastes, and I'm thinking in my mind as I'm saying this, you know, like food culture around the world has this as part of its history. When we eat all of those colors, and it said when we eat the main tastes always in every meal, that is what actually is chemically corresponding with a full nutritional plate.
Well, there are a couple of things that I wanted to tell you is that you hit on your relatives, that the concept with your relatives. So I feel more of an affinity to Europe, Mediterranean, than I have for the United States. I mean, this is clear to me now, even though I'm in Switzerland. The idea was I originally was going to go to Italy first. That was in my mind, but only because of I think sort of the presentation and how they do architecture, art, and all of that stuff. So I never got, you know, I'm in Switzerland, right? But I've managed to travel in the region of the Mediterranean, and I know this is where I'm going to be. With regard to food, there is an Israeli chef or cook who's very popular in the UK, and I cannot remember his name right now, but he has a cookbook out called Colors. And in this cookbook, it might be his like fifth or sixth cookbook. It has all of this stuff that you were just talking about, right? So
yeah,
you know, the seasons, the different types of vegetables, the presentation. Let's say even like, you know, when I go into a Turkish grocery store here in Switzerland, in Basel, how they have everything arranged. Do you understand what I mean? Like there's an arrangement to how the food is, you know. They'll have the junk food, but everything is organized in a certain manner that's very inviting. And
no, once you've traveled the world, and people always talk about this from America, because I don't even know how to describe the experience, but once you travel and you hit a spice market,
right,
you never see food ever again the same.
Right.
You know, like here, I did it the other day. Where did I got something in Trader Joe's, and it struck me as the opposite of that. It was so strange because I hadn't walked into Trader Joe's for a while, and I walked in and everything was in plastic. Right, like everything was like in all the fruit that should be breathing was in plastic, and it was not just in plastic but sectioned off, so that the way that you have to look for food in a Trader Joe's is very, very different than the experience of traveling the world, walking into a spice market and immediately feeling what would happen, like if this spice hit that, right?
Exactly.
It's telling its story. It's like a song walking into a spice market versus walking into a lot of American grocery stores. It's just things jailed in plastic.
I will even go further. When you talked about counting calories for losing weight, it's very similar to when you dance and a student will want to know the counts before they experience the actual music, right? So
That is brilliant. That's brilliant.
when I'm a counts, you're like, well, I made it up, not really thinking about counts in mind, but if we're going to put counts on it, this is what it would be, right?
Right.
But
we can put a count on it, but if you're only counting, you're never dancing.
Right.
Oh my gosh, so brilliant. Yeah. So if you're only counting calories, are you ever actually eating something? Right. Counting calories or counting what the nutrition is externally that somehow magically you think your body is going to digest.
That's why when I have photographed people that are bodybuilders or people that are into that, the thing that always is weird to me, even though I know they're doing something artful, right? They're so mechanical with everything that is involved. I believe that there's something missing with regard to how they do their performance to actually win the trophy, right? So there's like, oh, I can only have this little piece of this and this. I think the focus to me is a bit off. So that's why when you look at, old pictures of Arnold Schwarzenegger and he is in a ballet class, right? They show him in a ballet class. It's because he knows that there is a flow. He knows that there is a extra
thing. When I was much younger in Colorado, well, now much, much, much younger, I had a moment where I was teaching ballet for bodybuilders.
Yeah, they need it. They need it.
It was great. That was a hilarious class, but it was a great class. They really did need it.
Yeah, because their thinking is very much like the American packaging, right? That's how they're approaching, and there still might be beauty in it, but I see it as more like, isn't there another way that we could do this? Is there another way that you could think in order to get the process? Or I don't want to take anything away from them, but let's introduce this thought pattern and see. It's like a coach, that is trying to get better performance out of a track star.
Right? Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a system, if you're a bodybuilder, and it can be a fascinating system. But to me, then it's the same thing. Like, it might be your system if you're a bodybuilder, right? You're really into creating a system for yourself that allows for production of a certain type of body. Right. Okay, that's cool. I can even understand that, having been a dancer. But I think it's the same thing that you were saying. When does it become your song? When do you break through and it becomes your song rather than just a system? And again, we're acknowledging it's a really cool system. As dancers who take on odd disciplines, because we really do. I mean, to wake up in the morning and point your toes for the 10 millionth time in the same way is an odd thing to do, David. Most humans don't do that. But I did, and I probably would again. Now, arguably, I don't stand at the bar and do the same way, but I take my sun salutations. We're very discipline oriented. We're very routine oriented, and that is unusual. But the common denominator, again, between athletes and yogis and artists is this discipline creates a groundwork. That's what it does. It creates a base or a groundwork from which things can arise, from which things can be created. If you don't have that groundwork, or you haven't experienced it in your own unique way, I think it's difficult to get to the next stage, which is that flowing. What does that flowing creativity come from if there's no deep well, right? If there's no deep base of continuity and consistent. For dancers, it's training, but it really is. It's a discipline. And so I wonder how that relates to our discussion of food, that people feel that they can just eat all over the place rather than understanding you're building something in your own life. Right. You're building something in your own body. And the older that you get, I think you do understand it more, because if you've built a life on French fries, again, respectfully and with love, that's going to be very different than if you've built a life on fresh, amazing food, fresh, amazing, colorful, vitality building food.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm in total agreement. I'm with you. I'm with you. I was like, it's very funny because I now have a better understanding of why I'm with you, right? I think when we were younger, I was like, what's going on? Like, I'm still kind of, trying to find myself or try to find, my purpose, right? Now I'm pretty much there. I still have to leverage more, right? But that's happening. I don't have to worry too much about it. About what, like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it enough? Or, that sort of thing. But
so we had this seeing of each other, and not just you and me, like a lot within our community when we were younger. And I always drop in the Sanskrit words when I talk to you, but that's a darshan. It's a seeing, right? It's
we
like
had a scene.
There's
you
a
said,
seeing.
Right?
What?
Yeah. You said there was a scene, or we were in a scene. Is that what you call it?
No, a seeing.
A seeing.
A seeing.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a seeing. There was a seeing of each other.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
Not just you and me, like I'm saying, within our
yes, absolutely
young selves, our community, there was a seeing of each other that,
yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. In Sanskrit, it's called a darshan, a seeing, like SEEING.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Well, just so you know, Ellen, I spoke to Ellen Pinkett, who's a dancer and part of that community, and she
was a beautiful young dancer.
Yeah, I mean, it became clear to her. I think, who did she see my interview of? It said, I think she was like, wait a minute, Dave, you should be interviewing more people from, the South Orange Maplewood community. I'm like, I am. I am. Yeah. That's what I'm doing, right? So she says, okay, the next time you post it, let me know, right? So that's when I interviewed with Eddie Beckford, and he's also in Los Angeles doing working in film. But that's what I'm trying to present through our exchange or our interview, this seeing, right?
Yeah.
So that other people can see what we saw.
Yes.
And continue to see in one another.
Yeah.
And look, this just came to my head. It's very strange, but I'll say it. You know how in the rappers, like when DMX, the big time rapper, passed away because I think he had some drug issues, and then he had a heart attack, whatever. And then you get people weighing in, like, and Dr. Dre says this, and so and says this, or whatever. And this happens in all communities, but I honestly believe for the South Orange Maplewood group, we have a similar thing where when something happens to one of us, right? Everyone sort of weighs in or can weigh in, because each person was really, as you said, being seen as part of the bigger community, even if it's somebody that is, and it was a very unique time because you had all these different people, ethnic backgrounds together, sort of operating together in a space that wasn't necessarily, this was sort of a new thing. I mean, in the past, it was either all white or all Christian or all whatever. And then in our moment, it was like all these different pieces of different people together kind of coexisting. Yeah. So even when something happens to someone in one part of the community that's even separate from our whole community, we still kind of hear about it, right? You know what I mean? And we are kind of there for those people as well.
Well, you just threw me a major lifeline, because I'm not good at posting that. I'm not good at sharing that. I still always have this feeling like maybe I'm looking at other people or celebrating even other people more than myself. So I don't always post even half of what I'm up to. So you just threw me a lifetime lifeline, like, share more. Yeah, I'm still not using social media like that. Like, I'll post a lot of things that inspire me, or I'll post something that somebody else has written that I feel like, oh, we're passing this on. And I'm weird in that way. Okay. So I'll own that I do get a lot of like love. I get a lot of joy, like, you know what I mean? Like passing on somebody else's inspiration or somebody else's art, or somebody else's song, or like your dance. I love still that feeling of connectivity, but I have to share more what I'm up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
To let it work. Thank you for that. The way that you said it, in a way that I don't think it struck before.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm that community guy, even though when I moved to South Orange Maplewood, I was not, I didn't grow up from, kindergarten, right? Like usually the people that knew each other from kindergarten were really, really, really tight, right? Even when we were in high school. So in other words, like, kind of you left early, earlier, you graduated earlier. Even though I was sort of in the mix, I still wasn't really 100%, or I didn't feel 100% a part of what everyone else had experienced, right?
No, but I think that's the other common denominator amongst all of the, excuse me for throwing us in a pot, but like the art kids, right? We were like the art kids. So we're resonating in another way. And yeah, in one sense, we were creating this little bit of like slice of heaven for ourselves. It was very interesting. But in another sense, I think what you just said is important. We were the people that we wouldn't have quite fit in anything. We're not quite fitter inners. I never have been. I celebrate people. I adore the people that I know, but I'm not a fitter inner. It's very rare for me to have a community that I feel like, oh yes, I don't know how to say, like I fit in to this. We're not the people that you can exactly peg or that you can exactly define, or that you're humming with that. So it's true.
So that's why when you're in the clubhouse,
I'm part of another group that feels that way right now. I'm part of a group called Evolving Kundalini Yoga. And that's another wild full circle for me, because the first person that I took Kundalini Yoga from, Ravi Singh, I'm so much back in touch with him. And he's really been holding the space for this amazing group called Evolving Kundalini. And so I'm working with some of the people that I took yoga trainings with, like back in 1995. My friend Nidhi is one of them. We're actually doing a workshop on dreams and dream yoga next week on April 26th. I don't know when people are seeing this. It's long past. But yeah, like I've gone full circle, and I'm working with several friends closely and a whole group of people that I was aligned with in the early 90s through Ravi Singh. And like, that's been hilarious and wonderful and real, because we all have this same kind of quality, right? There's that rare quality of somehow we fit in with each other in a certain way, yet that is not a usual thing for a lot of us.
Yeah.
We're finding a singular voice with the idea that we can uphold the essence of Kundalini Yoga by letting it evolve, right? We have a singularity of vision around that, rather than thinking that either we can no longer teach Kundalini Yoga because of abuses that have come out in the community, or that we have to only teach Kundalini Yoga in a dogmatic way that we were introduced to decades ago. We are holding space for Kundalini Yoga to evolve. And that's a really important thing right now. And I'll just say that it's amazing to me that I've returned to this community that I essentially started in decades ago, feeling how much our voice just echoes each other, even though from the outside we would look like very different people with very different kinds of experiences.
Yeah. And I want to add this, and then I'm going to ask you, because we've gone long, if there's anything else you want to say. But I want to, prior to us having this conversation recorded, we were talking about your experience in social media and the clubhouse. And this is what I find when you're in a difficult situation, and having a difficult conversation, when someone is misunderstanding your intention, I think one of the great ways that you can gain back that power, and this is even, let's say, when you're in a group of people that are not like you, right? That you're in a different environment. When you're seen as the expert at something, or, i.e. when you're in your purpose. When you're in your purpose, you can teach, the highest concept, and that concept will, this is just what I feel, will tear down the barrier that exists in the moment between two or more people, or, you know, right? When usually you're having a dialogue and the person's not hearing you, you know, or you're in a group setting and the person's not hearing you. And that's why when I was telling you about this example of the makeup artist having an interview, and Bobbi Brown she is the height of of makeup, and she's done it like 1, 2, 3 times, right?
Right.
And yet she could not even speak.
Break in, yeah.
Because the topic was here lower, when the reality was, wait a minute, in order for everyone to do well, you guys actually have to meet her up here. But for whatever reason, there was no path from where she was, the makeup, you know, one of the top makeup artists in the business, and everyone else is just sort of swimming around. She couldn't throw a lifeline, and they clearly weren't seeing that she was a light, right? So it wasn't a waste of energy and space, but in other words, they left a lot of money on the table, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm looking at the interview, I see 6 different people, and then I see her, and I say, hey, wait a minute, she's the one, okay? I know you guys are talking about this particular topic, but you guys have to be mindful enough to be able to make that jump, and she has to have the courage enough to be able to say, hey, look, you know, this is what I've done, and I'm going to share it with you, right? And that could have totally changed the conversation, because they couldn't deny the fact that she knows what she's talking about, right?
They couldn't even deny the fact that, like, even saying Bobbi Brown, there's a feeling, you know, just saying Bobbi Brown, there's a whole energy feeling around that I immediately get. And that probably any woman gets, that we're a little bit like,
Right, exactly, right. I mean, and from a business point of view, a creative business person, I'm like, you know, I get excited because part of what I do also is I try to get things that are currently not monetized. I'm always interested in how to create monetization around creative ideas and products and things that we do, right? So the fact that dance is not necessarily as high performing, you know, monetized profession has always bothered me, you see.
Oh my God, yeah, that's an ongoing discussion of ours. But there's a yin and a yang energy to what you're saying. Like, the more yin response is to read the signs, excuse me, might have to get some water, but the more yin energy in that is like to read the signs of life and respond by not bombing into it, by not using your energy unwisely, right? By just, like, if I was Bobbi Brown, by just, like, letting the discussion go, not in a sense abusing my own energy. I'm just holding space. If they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. Yeah,
that's exactly what happened.
That's a more yin response, right? Like, I know my energy. That's it.
That's exactly what she did. Exactly how she played it.
Oh, that's so interesting, because now I have to see this interview. I didn't see it. So I'm commenting on an interview that I did not see.
I was stunned.
But I know that feeling very well. You know, that feeling of there's nothing, I don't need to encroach on anybody else's karma or anybody else's reaction.
That's right.
That's it. Right. The other method, and they're not necessarily opposed, but the other method, which would be more yang, right, and has a more not masculine but more male energy, would be finding what you were just talking about a moment ago, by tapping into that mastery of you and just, like, bringing it down for everybody. And that happens too, and I've seen that too. And I've seen some great women on stages with other doctors and other forums that, like, the energy is not focused on the greatness of the moment. And I've seen women just, like, take the stage and literally speak the truth and change the energy completely. But that's a more activated, right, yang or for lack of a better word, again, not masculine, but male energy. It's more like, let's go. So both can happen, and sometimes they happen together, but that's what I'm hearing in what you're saying. It's a yin and yang energy within yourself, you know, how to address that. If you're in that moment, right. And
it's fascinating to me. It is
fascinating.
And it's part of, I don't know, like and I know there's a course somewhere in this in terms of what we're talking about. I just don't know how to piece it together, but I sense value out of our discussion because I've always had these thoughts. I just haven't had I haven't had the space or the ability to talk to somebody about them and to really see, well, do you feel this, or do you see it in the same way, or do you understand what I'm processing? And not that is it right or wrong, but like, this is what's happening with me, right? And I think,
but what you just described is so cool, because then even you seeing that or being aware of that response, it may not have been your time to speak, but at the right time, all of that energy is gonna, right? It's gonna manifest at the right time. So it brings me back to my comment about now, like the world is our heaven on earth right now. But when you place yourself within the now, when you place yourself within this moment, that means that as the timeline spirals out from that place, the energy that manifests has an authenticity, or has a purity, has a truth. And as you said before, literally has what we call a God. There's a God essence in it. If you place yourself within the moment in total recognition, and even beyond that, of total recognition of what are the signs of life that are happening around you, right?
Yeah, well
What is
said.
going on?
I mean, look.
And from that moment, again, as time, and I'm using that word intentionally, as time spirals forth, at the right moment, that energy will manifest. At the right moment, that energy will be there for other people, so that you're heard, you're expressed, you're manifested, you know, you're committed, your full on energy will ignite at the right moment. That sounds very spiritual and very esoteric, but I mean it literally. You know?
I get it 100%. I mean, I do.
Yeah.
I don't know why and how I do, but I do. You know what I mean? I just do. People don't, you know, it could go on and on. Look, is there anything else that you want to add? We've been long, but what you have an event coming up? Is there anything else that you like to?
Well, I'll just say in the links, I want to post a few recipes now for soup. When you post this, we should post, or I'll post at least like 2 or 3 of my favorite Ayurvedic soup recipes. One is, I think it's called green immune soup. And there's another Ayurvedic soup that's just so good. There's an Ayurvedic soup that you can make. It's not that complicated, but the broth is like an elixir. And once people taste it, they're like, oh, I want that soup again. It's a soup with cabbage, actually. So I'll post a couple soup recipes, and I'll post also the book that I created if people want to explore yoga in a very, like, there's a lot of movement in that book. Even in stillness, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of movement in breath. There's a lot of movement in energy. There's a lot of resonance with those practices. So every time I speak to you, I realize even more how what I'm giving really comes from like the heart of a dancer. And then along with that, I wanted to say that for myself, I like talking. I can talk, but there's something special that happens that's beyond when I speak people into movement, which is essentially what happens in a yoga or a vinyasa class. That catalyst is where I feel like I'm within my soul's purpose, or, you know, what emanates as God consciousness within me. So it's bringing people or guiding people into movement and breath, which can be yoga or dance, but for the purpose of self-balanced awareness, you know, for the purpose of what we could even call like healing. And I really feel that my choreography when I was younger was starting to explore that. That's what it was really about, you know?
Yeah.
And
I
then,
can see that.
yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. It was an attempt to sort of land that experience or find like this nutritious alchemy of dance and movement that made us better somehow, that made us more well or more complete with our wholeness.
Yeah.
And then in doing healing work with other people, sometimes they're moving, you know, from the outside, it may look like they're moving very little, but it's not true. There's a tremendous freedom of energy. There's a tremendous freedom of inner movement or inner expression that can happen from the smallest physical movements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you were just bringing me back to that feeling that's when I feel most connected to, to my soul, my spirit, when I'm here in full joy and full like awe of what's possible.
Okay, well, very good. Hey, look, it's been a pleasure speaking with you again. It's like I feel like when I get off the when we end, you get off the call, I'm gonna be like, my brain is already going. You know, I definitely have to prepare for tomorrow and kind of bring it down, right?
Yeah.
Bring it down. But it's always good to have these kinds of conversations, and even better when you can start to take pieces of it and implement them into your life. So thank you so much.
I love talking to you. You taught me a lot in this conversation. It was amazing. And thank you for the opportunity of being part of this community that you're creating through these interviews.
Yeah. Look,
wonderful.
It's a pleasure, and it's always great to hear from you and to know what you're up to. I think I was doing this, like I told you, in high school. I'd go to your house and just sit and listen to you and see what you were doing. It is the same thing years later, right?
Wow.
You know, it's the same thing. Like, what is she doing? Let's call her up and see what's happening, you know?
And likewise, I want to hear about the evolution of this project of work, you know, where, like you said, it started with songs and now it's recipes. I want to hear about the evolution.
Yeah.
So we can leave it there, but you taught me a lot within this conversation. Mm-hmm. And I just, I love being with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, David.
Likewise too. Thank you. And enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you.
And have a great start to your week.
Thanks. Blessings.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye-bye.